Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring.
The first episode.
But there is a way out of all that oppresses
We need a
people
revolution.
here and around.
Anything else in a final analysis is bullshit.
This is a show about revolution.
The whole damn system!
To get organized for an actual revolution.
Break all the chains!
We have to make a revolution.
George Floyd was murdered.
To protect this planet.
The right to abortion nationwide hangs in the balance.
Nuclear warfare.
The world is running out of time.
What makes the RNL show the most important program on the internet is that we bring the way out of this madness through a real revolution.
Joining me now, I have a very special person to introduce. You guys may have seen her all over YouTube. You may have seen her on the TV screen. Joining me now, she's the co-host for the RNL show, The Revolution, Nothing Less. She's also the host of and producer for the We Only Want the World. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome in Sunsara Taylor. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, and I'm really happy to be with you, Blake. Thank you.
Absolutely. Sunsara, we are in some very, very difficult times right now. And I wanted to have you on the show to discuss a woman's right to choose. Mm-hmm. And right now, a woman's right to choose is under attack by our politicians. Mm-hmm. So I guess my first question is, you know, for the people that's listening, I can you explain to young women what the potential ruling from the Supreme Court means immediately for them?
Yeah, it's a very important question, and I appreciate you making the time, and I'm happy to speak with everybody tuning in about this, because it couldn't be more important. When women need the right to abortion, women need the right to decide for themselves when and whether they're going to have children. If you want to have a child, if that's a wanted child for a man, for a woman, for anybody who's about to be a parent, that's a beautiful thing. But for a woman to be told that she's going to be forced to have a child against her will, forced by the state, that her desires, her dreams, her ambitions, her life plans, her physical safety don't count for anything, that the state is going to hijack her body and force her to have a baby against her will, that is a form of enslavement. And I think it's very important that people understand the Supreme Court right now, just over a week ago, leaked a draft opinion. It's not yet the law, but it's a draft of their ruling on a major case out of Mississippi that would overturn women's fundamental right to abortion. It would completely decimate, abolish nationwide protections that we've had in this country for 49 years. And with this, immediately there are 26 states in this country that have laws on the books that would immediately go into effect or very quickly be enacted that would completely ban or severely restrict abortion. So half the country overnight will lose the right to abortion, and nationwide, women will lose that fundamental protection. And we will live in a society, if this goes down, that legally says women are less than fully human. Women are incubators if they happen to be pregnant, whether they want to be or not. And this would be one of the most significant reversals of a fundamental right in the history of this country, with devastating effects for women and for many other people, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
We're talking, to explain, we are talking about a 50-year freedom that's been in place for 50 years. I mean, this is something that a lot of people that's probably listening to this are probably saying they never lived in a world where a woman's right to choose is no more.
That's right.
And when we step back from this, a lot of the viewers out there might say, how the hell did this happen? Like why now? Why is this happening? And who the hell allowed it? And what's the nerve of these people to try to take that away? What do you say to that?
Oh, that's a great question too. So just first to the point that a lot of young people, actually anybody under 50 or 60, because they were kids that, they weren't thinking about these things. They were young, has lived with the right to abortion and takes it for granted. About a little more than 10 years ago, I was leading a rally for abortion rights in New York City. And it was the beginning of what we called an abortion rights freedom ride. We traveled the whole country and we rallied people because we saw this attack coming, which I'll speak to. It's your main question. But at the very kickoff rally, we were speaking, we were telling, abortion rights are in a state of emergency. We've got to stand up. We've got to defend this right. And we've got this going on. And I noticed there's a woman who came, she's listening. She was just walking by. Older woman came, she was listening a long time. And she came up near the stage and she was visibly shaking. So I went to talk to her and I asked her what was going on. And she told me when she was 16 years old, she grew up in Biloxi, Mississippi. And her best friend was Catholic and had a very Catholic patriarchal family. And her best friend found out that she was pregnant and she was so ashamed and so terrified to tell her father, especially what had happened to her. And I just want everybody listening, and I want you to remember what it's like to be 16 and you're young, you have your whole life ahead of you. You don't know what you have hopes and plans for the future. And then think about how desperate you'd have to be and how alone you'd have to feel to do what this young girl told me, which is what the story this woman told me. Her best friend at age 16 went and snuck around in her father's things and found where he kept his gun and took it out and killed herself. And this is what it means when women don't have the right to safe, legal abortion. On demand and without apology. There's the shame, the isolation, and the life-shattering consequences of having to be, of all that means. Many women died desperately seeking illegal, unsafe abortions before it was possible to get abortions. They were so desperate to terminate an unwanted pregnancy. Maybe they were trapped in an abusive relationship. Maybe they couldn't afford it. Maybe they just had other plans in their lives and they took a gamble. And many of them lost their lives. The emergency rooms used to be filled with women with perforated uteruses, with sepsis and infections who are dying. A lot of older doctors will tell the story. So we're looking at, and then every woman, because it's not just the women who died, it's every woman lives with the weight and the terror of that hanging over her. And so that's a form of enslavement to all women. It affects all women, and it hits poor women, Black women, brown women the hardest, but it affects all women. So I just think to bring everybody into the reality of that, because 1 in 4 women gets an abortion in this country, but it's very silenced. It's very shamed. A lot of people don't talk about it. Most people who get an abortion don't know their best friend might have had one, their mother might have had one. So it's important that we know how common it is and how much this will impact women. Where this attack has come from is a deeper question. And I think at the core of it, and it is something actually that we've done a lot of work on the Revolution Nothing Less show, exploring the roots of this. But having the right to birth control and having the right to abortion enabled a lot of women to control their lives in ways that they couldn't before and to enter public life. To go, we have women today in sports, in medicine, in academic life, in the workforce, at all levels, all the way up, all the way down, in a way that is unheard of 2 generations ago. That is contingent on abortion and birth control, as well as the struggle of women. And yes, there's been economic changes, but abortion has facilitated that. And there is a section of people in this country from the very beginning with Christian fundamentalist fascists at their core. And I'm not talking about all Christians. I'm talking about very reactionary biblical literalists who want to make that the law of the land, and women-hating Christians who have really resented the degree of independence that this has granted women. And there's been a desire to roll this back ever since. And it's very heavy to recognize that abortion is more stigmatized today, 50 years after it became legal, than it was in 1973 when the right was first won, because there's been a campaign shaming women outside every abortion clinic, out there screaming at women, calling them murderers, shaming them for not wanting to be mothers, telling them they're selfish, and chipping away at this right. 11 doctors and abortion providers have been assassinated by these Christian fanatics. I call them the American Taliban, which is what they are. Clinics have been bombed. And now we're at a place where they had a long game. They secured a majority on the Supreme Court. And it's very important to note, this has come dominantly from the Republicans and the fascists among them. But at every step, the Democratic Party has capitulated and conciliated with this assault. And I have to name, because a lot of people right now are saying, well, if we had had Hillary in instead of Trump, we wouldn't have these fascists on the court. And that's not looking at the deeper thing going on, because there's a deeper change that has driven this.
I think that the Democrats are too soft, if you will. Mm-hmm. Like they always, I mean, I understand you're in the Senate and you feel like you have to compromise in order to get things done. I understand the whole, blah, blah. However, there are people this is the consequences of not drawing a hard line when you need to draw that line. And the Republican Party and with Trump had no problem not even having a hearing for Mayor Garland, doing whatever they needed to do, lie, cheat, whatever they needed to do in order to get this type of dangerous majority on the court.
No, it's exactly right. The Republicans are willing to break the rules, go to the mat, and call out their social base of Christian fundamentalist fanatics, white supremacists, and everybody who aligns that way, even if they're not totally out of the closet about it. And the Democrats have constantly sought common ground for decades now. And I was going to say, Hillary, years ago, when Bill Clinton was president, I'm old enough to remember, safe, legal, and rare. She said, oh, yeah, we're going to defend abortion rights. Abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. And what's the implication of that? Rare. It's that there's something morally wrong with abortion. But there's not, because fetuses are not babies, and abortion is not murder, and women are not incubators. And the idea that it should be rare puts shame on women, and it concedes the high moral ground to these Christian fascists. And that's been the pattern. The Democratic Party has run anti-abortion candidates. They've sought common ground. The revolutionary leader, Bob Avakian, who I follow, and he's also the architect of the new communism. He just came out with this killer new piece. It's a great article up at revcom.us where he brings the receipts on the history of the Democrats facilitating, doing tremendous damage in demobilizing the opposition around abortion. They didn't spearhead the assault on abortion, but they demobilized people who needed to be standing up and fighting as this right was chipped away. And they have actually facilitated in building up these Christian fascists. And right now, it's a very critical turning point, because a lot of people got shocked awake with the leak of the Supreme Court decision, and people are correctly, righteously in the streets, and we need to be in the streets. But the question is posed, are we going to stay in the streets and fight to stop this, or is all this anger going to get channeled once again into supporting these Democrats in November, which is a dead end, and it will really destroy the lives and the rights of women. We have to be out in the streets fighting this.
Absolutely. And like I said, in elections, Democrats are and they need to think about this and explain to people, first of all, they have this. Sometimes I feel like Democrats feel like they're under the gun all the time in so many respects. Like, I feel like they feel like, well, if we get the majority, let's try to play it safe. That's not the way. That's not standing up for your progressives. That's not standing up for the people that sent you there. That have so basically, what is the economic implications regarding this type of ruling if they rule that way? Which there's nothing to say that they won't right now. This thing seems like it's going forward.
Yeah, that's the big thing. So I'm part of a group that I helped initiate together with others called Rise Up #4 abortionrights.org. And we've been saying to people that we got to get out in the streets and stop this from becoming the law. It is on track to become the law, and it's going to decimate women's lives. It's going to enslave women, and it's going to usher in, people should be aware, if Roe v. Wade is overturned, birth control is on the agenda.
Absolutely.
Interracial marriage rests on the same foundation as Roe v. Wade. LGBTQ rights, voter rights. There's a whole host of other fascist assaults that are coming if we let this fall. So we got to be out in the streets fighting to defend it now. But the other thing is, in terms of the Democrats continuing to capitulate, and you said, you know, they get a majority and they don't fight to win. I think the deepest reason for this is that they're not representatives of the people. They're representatives of the system that rules over the people. And they're part of the capitalist imperialist ruling class. They represent the interests of a system that has exploitation, racial oppression, patriarchal oppression of women, plunder of the world built into its foundation. And that's what they represent. And that's what they're going to serve. And so if you have half the ruling parties, the Republicans, on a fascist warpath preparing for a civil war, we saw them with the insurrection. We see them bombing abortion clinics. We see them getting ready to gut fundamental rights. And the Democrats know that those fascists are going to fight to the death over that.
They stormed the Capitol.
Yeah. And so these Democrats, as representatives of this system, are trying to hold their system together. So they keep seeking common ground and trying to calm our side down because they don't want it to split open. But the fundamental interest of the people is to stop this fascist direction. And we have to stand up and do that ourselves. We have to rely on ourselves. The Democrats will not do that. They cannot do that. That's not who they represent. And then, you know, more fundamentally, we need to fight in the streets to defeat this assault now. But to get to a fundamentally just society, we need to bring this system down. We need a revolution. We need a different social order, a different economic order, a different form of rule. That's why, you know, that's what Bob Avakian has envisioned. He's written a constitution for a new socialist republic in North America that we could put into place after a revolution. So, you know, that's ultimately, and maybe not so ultimately in these wild times where things are really coming up for grabs, what humanity needs and what we need to be fighting for. And we need to lift our sights to.
Susan Collins, it was Manchin, Joe Manchin, and Senator Murkowski, they voted against the bill that would codify Roe v. Wade. I guess my question is what would you say to, especially Susan Collins? I mean, we know Joe Manchin is crazy, but Susan Collins and Murkowski, you're in a position and you understand what this means for women, and you're gonna vote not to and this is just to put the bill back in place, the law back in place, wherein states can't mess with it.
Yeah.
They voted no.
Yeah, I guess I have nothing to say to Susan Collins and Murkowski. I have nothing to say to them. I have a lot to say to the people who keep waiting and hoping for them to do better. They keep telling you they're not going to defend your rights. They keep telling you, they keep showing you, when are you going to learn? If you want women to be treated as full human beings, not property of the state, you're going to have to get out there and you're going to have to fight for it yourselves. And that's what Rise Up for Abortion Rights is doing. That's what I've been in the streets doing. That's what students walked out last week. That was beautiful. The young people standing up are doing. We need more of that. We need to bring this country to a halt. We need to shut it down. We need to do that. They're not going to do it. They're never going to do it.
You know what else is also shows you something about the Republican Party and what they're trying to do and how they're trying to gut this? is you got an organization like Planned Parenthood, who, yes, they do abortions there, but they also do other things like they check for breast cancer.
Yeah.
They have all different. It's women's health.
Yeah.
Why in the world would you try to gut an organization like that? And you understand how women are going there for their health, and then on the other hand, you're trying to cut health care. You're trying to take away Obamacare. What in the world are they doing? Like,
no, it just shows that it's actually about controlling women. That's their agenda. They talk about babies. It's never been about babies. They oppose birth control. They oppose women's health care. Everything you're saying. I do have a question for you, though. I know that maybe that's turning the tables, but I'm very interested. I'm very interested because I hear it in your voice and I see it in your response at different points. That you have some sense of how deeply important the right to choose is to women's lives. And I'd like to understand how you see that and why, what formed that opinion for you.
Well, see, I guess fundamentally, what people, I guess I have a problem with the looking down on other people. Because I feel like politicians who are in, for particularly Republicans, feel like they're above other human beings. And if they didn't feel that way, why would you come against a woman? That's a freedom. That's you're coming against them and trying to make them second class, along with voting rights. You're taking away the right that African Americans have to vote, and you're trying to cheat by it. You're trying to cut the legs out from people, and that's fundamentally wrong. You know, I don't care what a person is. I don't care what they believe in. They are human beings, and they have rights in this country. And so the nerve of somebody to try to come in and try to take a fundamental right from a human being and treat them as if they don't count is absolutely a non-starter with me.
I respect that quite a bit. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I look at the even if you have a constituents and you take away the right for women to choose. Now look at the economics. That you're gonna hurt your own constituents. Now you're in Congress. You could look, you have paperwork. You have a Senate office. You have people who can go get you the information and put it on your desk while you're on the phone with family. You can do all sorts of things to get that type of information to you. But yet, and it comes down to this. Are you just voting with your party because you feel pressure? Are you voting with your party because you don't care? Are you voting with your party because you want to get reelected? And those things, what else are we to think?
I guess I think we do need to think a little deeper than that. And I don't mean that in a deep thought, pejorative sense, but I mean actually deeper in the structure than that. That we do live in a system. It has a name. It's capitalism, imperialism. It's a system. You think about it, just follow the thought for a moment. There's no such thing. Okay, there's no such thing in this society as the right to eat. And even if you had all the people in the country want it, vote for it, even if you had some senators and Congress people vote for it, you couldn't have the right to eat in a capitalist society. Because if you go into the store and you take what food you need and you don't pay for it, how's that store going to resupply? If they're not getting the money, they can't resupply. That's capitalism. Everything has to be an exchange, and somewhere along the way, some capitalist has to make a profit off of it. The people who grow all the food, make all the products, mine the children in the mines in the Congo, mining the coltan in our cell phones, that make them run, the children in Indonesia or Bangladesh stitching the clothes that we wear. All this is who makes all these things. And they're put to work to do so by some major capitalist corporations in the world. And you can't get what you need to survive without taking that money and exchanging it with that corporation that's exploited those children or those other workers to get what you need. So that's the operation. You can't have the right to eat in that system because it has to go through that commodity system. You have to pay for it. You don't have the right to housing because housing is built for those who can afford to pay for it, not because there's a need for housing. What could be more fundamental to human existence than the right to eat and the right to housing? But even if you had votes for that, you couldn't pass that because it goes out of whack with the system itself. And I'm saying this because all of the politicians, Democrat, Republican, they're different, but they're all beholden to that system. That system in America also has white supremacy built into its foundation. It's founded on it and it perpetuates it today. That's why their police continue to get away with murder after murder after murder of Black and brown people, and they're almost never punished because that is their job, to enforce that system with the exploitation and the white supremacy. That's why women are abused, degraded. We have a culture that reinforces that. And we have an assault on women's most fundamental right to control their bodies, their lives, their destinies. That patriarchy is also built into this system for more complex reasons, owing to the nature of the family as an economic unit under capitalism and the patriarchal role of the family. So there's deeper laws that all of them are beholden to, all of the politicians. And that's why you want to change all that. You got to have a different system.
I guess. Now let's talk about that system.
Yeah.
We are talking about a system that has been in place for decades upon decades, and that system has brought us, if we look at it in a balanced way, right? Now, there's a lot of things that I disagree with this system about, and that's all about putting pressure on your politicians and making sure they do what you would like them to do. What I'll say is that right at this moment, I feel like a realistic approach that will advance the rights of our people, for progressives, not only for progressives, but a lot of people that live in red states. Now I identified the system, but then we have to live with red state politicians, right? Now, I have my problems with blue state politicians, but red state politicians are the ones who are really, really trying to take us back at this particular point. To get things moving in the right direction, and this is what we're going into a whole. That's
good. This is good. This is where it's important. Go ahead.
To get things moving just at this point, to get the right to vote the way we want it, to get a woman's right to choose back how it was before, with probably more freedoms in there. Mm-hmm. How I feel like, let's talk. A lot of stuff takes money, right? It takes money. And I feel like realistically, a balanced approach would be, how do we advance the football down the field 15 to 20 yards, right? Because once you do that, you have momentum. But in order to advance the football, we have to convince our team not only our team, but we got to convince everybody else that, hey, this is how you advance. This is how you move forward. Now, as far as the system is concerned, what we want to do with that, then we could move with that. However, we have a problem with media personalities. We have a problem with media personalities. We have a problem with corporate fund and with corporate that push conspiracy theories. So we have to convince regular citizens. We have to I think the Democrats really have to get more smarter about how they move and motivate and teach people about the political system that we're in. Okay, because we're not the only ones that's in this system. We have a bunch of democracies across the country who's fighting for our freedom right now, who are in the type of system that we are, and we are constantly trying to make it better. You know, I think to tear down the system would do us it would first of all not only put us on our heels, but it would move us back to where we're in. Because once you talk about destroying a system, you're talking about foreign policy. You're talking about where other governments and terrorist organizations that could come in and swoop in and take or convince at least half of your people that the direction that we're trying to take them is wrong. So I think disinformation is real. I think disinformation is a tool used by foreign governments to try and split us and tear the country apart. I believe a breakdown of the system is a lot more complicated than what it sounds. Because, like I said, you are dealing with foreign policy. You have people in other countries who's trying to kill us. So, and because we have a lot of things in place as far as government-wise that continue to make sure that we have the freedoms that we have. However, what we're talking about is basically voters, right? We're talking about the voters who keep on putting these same politicians who are 70-something years old and who are 80-something years old back into political office. These people are in office and they're trying to convince the voter that their rights are not necessarily the kind of rights that they need. So what they're basically saying with this is they're saying, hey, look, let me take that right, but, you know, it's a right that you didn't really need anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So
yeah. So you're raising quite a few different contradictions, quite a few different questions all woven together there. So I'm going to do my best. But first I want to say the problem with these politicians is, you know, not that they're old, not that they're 80 or 70 or that they're white or that they're men or this or that. It's what they are imposing. It's the content of what they're doing and the role they're playing. They are servants of a system that is a nightmare for humanity. And I'll say, because I follow an old white man. Bob Avakian is an old white man. He came out of the 60s. He's a stone cold all the way through and through revolutionary, a scientific communist. And I follow him because he has analyzed why this system cannot be reformed. It cannot be made into something it's not. This is why you're talking about rights that were won through struggle, for fierce struggle in the streets, that are being, and blood. The right to vote, the right of women to abortion, the civil rights struggle, the Black liberation struggle, the gay liberation struggle, all of these rights that we have, these were not handed down. These were won through struggle. And every single one of them has been first of all, was incomplete, never fully won because of the nature of the system, and has been under attack since they were won. That's why we're looking at the reversal. That's why these women, old women, show up at these protests saying, with signs around abortion, they say, I can't believe I'm still having to fight for this shit. And they're right. 50 years later, they're fighting the same battle. Voting rights are being taken away. The lives of Black people are under assault. All these rights were never firm, and they're under assault. And this is why we need a revolution. But let me just, because you also raised, and I follow Bob Avakian, this old white man, because he's developed a solution, a strategy, a scientific approach to this, including, see, while we had our pause, I grabbed it because it speaks to your other question. He wrote a constitution for the new socialist republic in North America. This is a new economic system, not based on exploitation, based on meeting people's needs in a collective way, sharing the abundance, and not just for America and Americans, but for the people of the world, overcoming these divisions in the world. A new social system where the fundamental right of a woman to control her body and reproduction is built into the Constitution. It's not up for debate, where the security forces, the law enforcement is really there to protect and serve and protect and defend the rights of the people, not to go out and terrorize the people and back up an exploitative white supremacist system. So you can't make the changes that you want to see as a justice-loving person that most of society needs and humanity needs under this system. And just to your last point, I know that because you layered a lot of things in there, to this question of foreign powers interfering, which is real, I have two things to say. Number one, this system of imperialism that we live under is not serving humanity, and it's not serving us. They're not protecting us, and they're not protecting humanity. They're carrying out at this very moment. Their media doesn't cover it. At this very moment, they're backing Saudi Arabia's war crimes and genocide against the children in Yemen and the people of Yemen. They've carried out, this is the only country in the history of the world that dropped nuclear bombs on civilian populations, not one time, but twice, and they've still never apologized for it. This is a country that terrorizes the globe, has from day one, founded on genocide and slavery, has continued to carry this out, has more people incarcerated, more Black people incarcerated than any. If this was happening in any other part of the world, they'd look at it, they'd point their finger and say, look at them, they're not a democracy like us, but it's happening here. So the politicians are silent, including Biden, who played a big role in making this mass incarceration happen in the get-go in 96, and it's claimed so many lives. So yeah, so my point in this, that's the first thing. This country is not protecting the people to begin with. And second of all, I guess it's the same point another way, is that if we want to talk about our security in the future, and I mean the global we, as well as the people in this country, we have to get out from under this system fast, because they are literally putting us on a planetary course of destruction, emitting their fossil fuels, their destruction. They're burning up the planet. We might not survive. And so to me, the idea that yes, a revolution is destabilizing, but it's destabilizing oppression, and it's clearing the path for something where we can rationally take care of each other, overcome the divisions, meet people's needs in a collective way, on a global scale, and in a way that cares for and does the best we can to repair as much as we can of the planet. That we have the resources for. And because of Bob Avakian, we have a framework and a scientific approach to make it real. And to me, that's worth rising up for. Okay, there's one more point. You did raise a lot. One more point, because you raised it and it gets raised a lot. It's important. People think, okay, revolution might be what we ultimately need, but how is that going to help things right now? And to this I say, because you kind of raised, well, let's get a few things 15 yards down the field, then we can think about how to get further. And to that I will say that the more people break out of the killing and suffocating confines of the choices this system gives us, all you can do is pick between an outright fascist and like the ones who want to call women host bodies and take away their right to abortion, talk about women like we're not people, host bodies, and a party that is led by Biden who won't even say the word abortion or fight for abortion. If those are your choices, you're lost from the beginning. But they're not our choices. We can get outside that, and the building struggle and resistance in the streets, which is frankly how voting was won. Voting rights weren't won by voting. They were won in the streets. Women's right to abortion wasn't won by voting. It was won through struggle. All these rights were won through struggle. If we did more of that, we'd be better off now, and we'd be building up our strength that could contribute to hastening a revolution.
That right there, what you're saying, now you can take that message and try to convince around 400 million people that is what they need to do. And some of the stuff you said, I agree with. Mm-hmm. What I will say is that I like to use, instead of saying the words they, sometimes I like to be more specific. Like, for example, one of the reasons why we're going through what we're going through with a woman's right to choose is because the people voted in a guy named Donald Trump. Now, we have extreme things that happen in this country throughout the year. One of the things that's very rare is that one president has the opportunity to put 3 justices on the court in the span of 4 years. You know, that's the kind of thing that hardly ever, I can't even go back in history and try to think of in modern American history that could think of someone who did that. So this is how this situation came about. This is how the situation with voting rights became an issue, because the people voted in a crazy man. If Trump was never elected, we wouldn't have sitting here the issue of a woman's right to choose. It was under assault. It was under assault by the right for years. Yeah. Ever since it was passed 50 years ago, it was always under assault. But there was nobody, no responsible politician, including the devil himself, Mitch McConnell, that would even think about, doing that himself. If you notice, they wanted the Supreme Court to do it, not them, not the politicians. So my point is that things are happening perhaps wrong because there was a thing that made it happen. So to say that, I understand that progress in this country, because of the system we're in, is slow. Yes. But I would not yet throw away the whole system. I feel like we got to fight for it. Now,
what do you see is so good in this system? What do you want to keep?
The fact that we're sitting here right now talking over Zoom.
Yeah.
And the fact that we could just sit in our homes and go to work the next day and make money and have a chance to buy homes, although there's problems with that, but we have other countries that have democracies, a lot of the stuff that they go through is very similar, except that we don't see it because national news don't cover it. Mm-hmm. But so what I'm saying is that if you wanted to throw away this system, you have to convince 400 million other people to do the same. And in between that point of throwing away a system, what are you going to do in between there? Mm-hmm. We have problems just trying to get everybody to wear a mask, let alone throw away a system.
First of all, I love that you respect the mask. I appreciate that, and all your references along the way about taking on conspiracy theory and it's very important that people be trained in critical thinking, evidence-based thinking. It's crucially important. It's actually a cornerstone of the revolutionary leadership and method that Bob Avakian has forged. It's a cornerstone of the new communism. Is you don't go based on, and even in this conversation, based on what everybody thinks, what everybody says, what might be popular, what you hear here and there. Like Trump says, well, people are saying. No, you go based on evidence. Show me the evidence. Let's get to the root of things. Let's understand how it really works. And if it's hard, if it's unpopular, but it's true, you got to go with it. And if it matters to humanity. And on this, I think the evidence does show that this system in its deepest essence cannot be reformed into serving the needs and the interests of humanity. And the very things that you're describing, that, yeah, we can sit here on Zoom and talk, and we have most people in this country have clean drinking water. We have a lot of goodies in America, a lot of things that make life comfortable and make life pleasant for many people. But all of this, and this is why I held up my cell phone, this is, and the phone and the Zoom functions this way too. There's coltan in here. That's how it functions. These are precious, rare earth minerals and other stones. They are mined by children in Congo, in a place where rape over the resource wars has been such a mass phenomenon. Thousands of women there have fistula, they've been raped so badly that their bodies are torn up and that they leak their urine and their feces. It's really brutal. It's horrific. Our clothes, again, stitched by children in Bangladesh, families in Bangladesh, they've had, the conditions are so desperate that whole buildings have collapsed. No building codes, no rights of these people. They've collapsed with hundreds of workers inside. Sometimes 900 will die in one collapse, and people show up to work the next day because that's their level of desperation. That's where the goodies in America come from. And somebody said years ago, and it's very important, that living in America, I know the reference is different now because it's a generation, it's a TV generation later, but you'll know the reference. Living in America is like living in the house of Tony Soprano. You have some idea that all the goodies that you have inside the house have something to do with what he does out there, but you don't want to look too closely because you don't really want to know. And that's what it's like, all these privileges. Okay, number one. Number two, they let you say a lot of things. They let you do a lot of things in this country. You have all these so-called freedoms, and you do have more freedoms in a lot of places, but they rest on that plunder and exploitation around the world, and they are only allowed up until you start to challenge their system. And we saw that writ large during the Beautiful Rising when people stood up against the police murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and the police came out with force. And that was not just Trump, although it was him. And he called out the military, and now it's come out, he wanted to shoot people in the knees and do more. But the Democrats did it too. Democrats also called out National Guard. Democrats also called their police in. And we saw people being nonviolent protesters, brutalized, dragged through the streets, run over by cars. All of this happened. So they let you say what you want to say and have a show on the internet. I have a show too, or I'm part of a show, the Revolution Nothing Less show. And they allow it to a degree. But when you start to challenge their order, and you start to get people aroused and awakened, then they come down on you. And that's a challenge the revolution will have to traverse. But it doesn't mean we can't do it. It just reveals their nature. And yeah, go ahead.
I hear you saying they a lot.
Yeah.
Right? And see, that's one of the things, it's one of the reasons why we have these shows, right?
Yeah.
We have these shows so that we can educate Americans around the political process. We educate them on what issues are going on, and this is how you advance yourself. We educate them that local voting can be way more important than federal voting. You know what I'm saying? So we understand that there are bad things that happen all the time in this world. Mm-hmm. And we understand that governments, like you said, the clothes that we're wearing these things are horrible that's happening. But one thing that you also said is that all of those countries that you said, they also have governments. Mm-hmm. And some of those governments are not on the up and up.
Oh, that's definitely true, but that's called imperialism. These are countries that have been subjugated. I mean, just let's be real. You have some.
It's just like I put it to you like this: it's the food. It's the food chain supply, right?
Yeah.
In other countries, and people always talk about this inflation stuff. They have to understand that inflation's happening all over the world.
Yeah.
And it's happening so bad. And other presidents, other prime ministers are dealing with the same thing Biden is dealing with. Most of the issues, not most, but some of the issues that Biden is dealing with, other presidents are dealing with too. So our media isn't telling us that, oh, this is happening over in so-and-so. Yeah. But see, what happens is we have enough money, we have enough riches, we have a democracy in place to wherein it doesn't hurt us the way it hurts some other countries that have authoritarians in office. They chose to be authoritarians because they felt like they could run their country. They rose to power, and they felt like they could run their country on a strong man's ideology.
Yeah, but here's, I have to say, okay, you get to look around the world. How many governments that were popularly elected in some of these oppressed nations, third world countries, U.S. backed coups and overthrew them and installed their own strongmen that served imperialist interests. The U.S. has backed death squads in Guatemala, El Salvador. It's fueled civil wars around the world. It bombed Grenada. It went into Dominican Republic. It slaughtered millions in Vietnam. I mean, it's just, you go around, there's not a corner on this planet that the U.S., I'm not even touching yet. I haven't even mentioned yet Iraq, Afghanistan.
The U.S. does a lot of things.
So, but my point in saying this is that those governments in those other places reflect, first of all, being countries that were colonized for many years, and their whole development and infrastructure was shaped and misshaped by that. There's countries, I mean, where like for a long time, Mexico had a train line ran north and south. So the agricultural goods could all come to El Norte, and infrastructure that held that country together as its own country and served its own people didn't exist, not because of the Mexican people or even the Mexican government per se, but because of the domination from the north of U.S. imperialism. And so its economy was distorted. Other countries are turned into virtual sweatshops. I keep bringing up Bangladesh. That was a colony, then it got independence, but it got in sort of a neo-colonial form of subjugation. There are entire countries that are misshapen by the role they play, yes, in the global supply chain, in the service of a handful of imperialist countries that dominate them and distort them. And so I don't think it's a choice between democracies do well and other authoritarians don't do well. I think there is literally a direct connection between the freedoms afforded by those of us who live in the countries on the top of that imperialist food chain and the subjugation and terror and instability that most of those in the oppressed countries live with. So
are you saying that it's the United States' fault that...
Absolutely. What's the question? Okay, maybe not every single thing. Overwhelmingly, the system I do blame. Go ahead, specify.
So what I'm saying is, look, what I'm saying is that yes, we have problems.
Yeah.
There's good and bad in the world, and there's nothing that we can do, even as a country, the United States, that could ever stop the good and the bad that happens in the world. And does it make us uncomfortable? People that love people around the globe, don't care what their background is, that we take them in. Does it bother us? Yes, that's why Democrats are so upset, because it bothers us. Look what happened in Ukraine. It's not right for another country to come in and just devastate their country. That there are things that happen, Yemen, like you just said, there are things that happen in the world that is absolutely not right. But the world, at the same time, there are people in this country that fight for those people, that challenge our government, that go straight to the streets in front of the White House and protest. And that's an absolute good thing. And we have the freedom. But see, we also have the freedom to change who we want as our leaders. And that's why I come back to the voting and the political process, that yes, a lot of this stuff is being slanted by corporate. Yes, That there are, like I said, there are good and the bad in the world, but we also have a stake in this. We also have a vote. And once we vote and once we get organized and we all say, hey, listen, we want this thing in Yemen to stop and we want it to stop now, we can elect our leader to get up there and say, look, this stops right now. And that's the difference between us and a lot of these other countries, is the fact that they don't have that choice. We do have that choice.
But people in this country don't even know about Yemen because none
the American media doesn't teach them.
Yeah, because the political system that we live under, both parties of the rulers want to keep that going. And so they don't talk about it. So the media doesn't talk about it. So people don't know that's a choice. They don't even know what's happening.
Yeah, because the media...
Everybody knows about Ukraine because we're being brainwashed every minute to think Russia's the bad guy. Russia's the bad guy. We got to arm the Ukrainians. And frankly, people's sentiments, they're just sympathies with the Ukrainian people, are being manipulated because the U.S. doesn't give a damn about the Ukrainians. It's treating them like cannon fodder. It's drawing that war out to weaken Russia. It's using the Ukrainian people's suffering in their rivalry. It's so dishonest. So people being played to support their U.S. ambitions in Ukraine, I definitely sympathize with the Ukrainian people, but not with the U.S.'s using of them. And it doesn't tell you anything about Yemen. And so I guess I think it'd be worth it. I know we could stay on this tip, but I do think it's worth it because you did invite me.
Right.
Talk about abortion. And we've ranged, and I love it. I love it. No, I do. It's important. All of this is so important. I really appreciate it. But I do, I know that we share the view that this is an absolute dividing line moment that cannot be allowed to go down with people passive and silent. And this is where I feel a lot of us, we should have a society-wide argument over, can we reform this system or do we need to overthrow it? Why or why not? Where's the evidence? The kind of exchange we're having. People, this would be good if people were debating. We won't all agree, but even as we do, I was just going to say, even as we do, we have to find our unity in the streets right now to stop this right from being taken away, to stand up for abortion rights. Go ahead. Thank you.
See, my thing is, the problem I have is that you don't storm the Capitol.
No.
Right? And you don't, especially based on a conspiracy theory, wherein,
Confederate flag and hangman's noose.
Wherein people are seeing numbers and letters and think that there's certain messages being spoken. It's the reason why we have to continue to educate people on the political system. If they want to see changes around them, there's a police chief. You can get him to walking. There's a town supervisor. You can give him his walking papers. There are, and what it is, and I really think that half of this country does not vote down ballot. I believe that they go into the voting booth because we see it. We that's not a conspiracy theory. We see it. How do we see it? We see it based on the numbers. When you look at the town supervisor and how he got elected, you look at the numbers, and the numbers doesn't show everybody in that town who voted, which means they went into the booth and voted for president and walked back out. The only people that they know on that ticket is the president and the vice president. They don't know their senator. Some of them don't know their governor. Some people, and so here is the reason why. And then what happens? They get frustrated. And then they start talking about they start talking about the system, how the system is there to, you can give somebody their walking papers and then you let them know, hey, listen, I want this person in charge because they believe in equality. I want this person.
If you're in a prison and you had the right to change the warden, you'd still be in prison.
That's true. You would.
And that's because you're changing.
We're not in prison.
No, it's an analogy. You're changing the players. You're not changing the game. You're not changing the system. And the difference that we are having in this discussion, the essence of it is you are talking about changing the players. I'm talking about changing the system. And and obviously we have a different analysis on how deep the problems are rooted, how deeply they're rooted, where they lie. And that is what I'm saying is that's an important discussion. And I really appreciate and agree with you that it doesn't get settled by conspiracy, or I heard this, or I like this, or this makes me more comfortable. It gets settled on the basis of arguments and evidence. And you're marshaling your argument and evidence, and I'm marshaling mine. I haven't been won over by yours, but I think it's an important conversation. No, I think it's profoundly important. And I also think it's extremely important that we recognize that right now, and I do want to bring it back to this because it's so germane. People don't always understand. It's where you began. What a right means, how deeply they've taken it for granted when it's on the chopping block. And our chance to save the right to abortion is now, while the draft is out, before it becomes the law. And this is a window, and so many people, including right now the Democratic Party, and yes, the so-called leaders of the so-called women's movement who are tied to and slavishly tied to the Democratic Party, are all out there telling you that basically you have to wait for the elections and you have to accept that Roe is going to fall when it hasn't even come out yet. And I know it's a long shot. It's not going to be easy, but there are many times in history, all the examples we've talked about, civil rights, the struggle, the women's liberation struggle, the gay liberation struggle. There's all the rights. The right to vote was won through struggle that broke outside the official channels and made what everybody thought was impossible. What before that had seemed impossible, they made it possible through their struggle in the streets, out in public. And that's what's needed now. And it's the reason I wear the green bandana, because this is a symbol that came out of Argentina. See, it's got the fist and Rise Up for Abortion Rights.org. This came out of Argentina, where abortion was criminalized. Women went to prison for miscarriages. It's a deeply Catholic country, very patriarchal, very repressive. And they kept coming back in the streets again and again and again. And they woke up more people, and they woke up more people. And eventually they had millions, and they tore down the laws that criminalized abortion. They made possible what everybody thought was impossible through struggle in the streets. And the women in Colombia looked at that example and saw what they did, and they took up the green bandana and they went in the streets. And in February of this year, they decriminalized abortion. This is monumental changes in those societies through struggle. And that's the kind of struggle we need right now, that everybody has to be part of. And that's why we wear the green bandana. Everybody should get a green bandana. And all of us, as we continue the arguments about how to fundamentally solve the problem, have to stand shoulder to shoulder together against this emergency that we all have an interest in stopping. And the way to do that is in the streets right now.
You know, and for the men out there, this issue concerns you, because we all got here through a woman. And with this bill, it will make you a father. If you're concerned about your money, economics, it concerns you. It is our sisters out there who can possibly lose their right to choose. And we as men cannot have that. If it's your sister and your family, you will say, hell no. So I'm standing here with my sister, and I'm glad you came on the show. It was a great talk, and we got to talk more.
I would love that. It was really a great pleasure. Thank you, Blake.
Thank you so much.